Last week, as you might recall, I said about debunking the idea that learning a second language, like English for example, or French or German to native-like levels as an adult is not really possible. There are a number of practices that you might be doing that will prevent you from ever reaching native-like levels. So today what I want to do is look at 4 practices that I believe hold up this myth. These are like 4 legs of a table. So each week I'm going to look at one of the legs and chop away one of the legs. So hopefully by the end of the 4th week, the whole myth will come tumbling down in your mind. The first one is that many have a belief that translation is a necessary part of learning a new language. Everyone can see its benefits. They don't know a word or something and they look it up and bang, you have the word instantly. It's instant gratification. You feel like you can relax a bit. You feel like you know the language a bit more. And so it actually is very alluring, very tempting thing to do is to translate. So why on earth would anybody do anything differently? And it seems to me that very few in fact do. So what can be so wrong with that? Well, I'll look into that shortly, but before I do, I want you to consider a number of what I will call irrefutable facts. And these are not false facts. These are irrefutable. They can't be dispelled. That's what I think anyway. And you can judge for yourself when you listen to them. So the first one is that every language you learn occupies a different place, physical place in your brain. So for example, English might be here, your first language might be there, and then another language like, I don't know, Vietnamese or Russian might be there, and then Indonesian back there, or German over here. And I'm not sure exactly where the places are, but I have seen the brain maps. And it's incontrovertible. When a person speaks one language, the lights in that part of the brain go up, and none of the lights are going up anywhere else. And these lights aren't real lights. This is the energy that gets activated when you're speaking a language. So that's the first one. The second one is that when you speak in the new language that you're learning, you have no time to translate. And if you are translating what you're speaking, you must be speaking very, very, very slowly. So anybody who gets to any level of competency at all will recognize that there's no time to translate. So the second thing is, to do with that, is the same for listening. So if you're listening to somebody, translation is possible, but all that will do is take you away from whatever else they're saying. So you really can't take the trouble to translate, going backwards and forth from different parts of the brain, because it's a very slow process in fact. Now there are of course translators and their profession is to do that, but that's a whole other story and they've been trained for that. But the likes of you and me, this is not really possible. They're the 3 facts. So let's go back and look at the reasons why it is a good idea to avoid translation as much as possible. Now before I look into the reasons, I will say one thing, that there are times where translation is necessary or advisable or a good idea, let's say. Let's say you go to a doctor or a lawyer, or there's some kind of serious kind of situation involved in where it's essential. Now, you're using translation here as a tool, not as a way of learning, right? I draw a distinction here. So when you're reading a book, you don't need to translate, or when you're talking to your friends or listening to TV, you don't need to do it necessarily, but in some situations you do. So don't get me wrong, again, sometimes do it. Good idea. So for the first main reason, first thing I want you to do is to consider young kids learning their first language. Now, you may jump and think, oh no, it's different. Adults are different to kids. Well, yeah, of course, I agree. But to actually say we're completely different and ignore what we did as a child, I believe is a big mistake. There are things we can learn from it and things we should and we need to learn from that experience. And some things don't really relate, but many things do. So the one thing I want to talk about here is that as a child is learning their first language, they develop certain skills, particular skills that enable them to learn that language. So they develop really good listening skills, not just listening to sounds, but to meanings, and they develop really good looking perceptual skills. So they look at things really carefully and try to work out the meaning from what actually is going on, not just the language. As their English or their first language gets better and better, their ability to deduce things, to work things out, to infer things, to guess things, these are all skills they develop. And these are skills that you will need if you want to learn any language to high levels. And these skills can be developed from the get-go, from the beginning, or they can be late, or whenever you are, whatever stage you're at, you can still work at developing these skills. And they're necessary. I believe it's completely impossible to learn a language to any decent level, short of even a native-like level, if you don't get these skills up and to a really high level. And the one way I believe that can really help you develop these skills is to stop translating. Stop right now. Don't do it anymore unless you really need to. So that's the thing that I believe will help you enormously to start to activate these skills. The second reason I want to talk about it is a little bit related to the first, in fact, but as I mentioned earlier on, the language you're learning, and let's say you're learning English, because I'll choose some language, you're learning English, you're developing the English muscles in this brain, right? That's what you're doing. And so everything you do has to be developing these muscles. Now, if you're actually linking this language to your first language, what you're doing is also setting up these connections, these neural pathways. And the more you use it, the stronger they become. And so what happens is that even when you get to a high level, and even you feel like really high level, you still feel like you're using the first language. And I hear this time and time again from people, and the only reason why that's happening is because they have these neural pathways. So even though the English is at a really high level, these links are just jumping into place all the time. They're jumping into use. So this basically sets up a feeling in them that they need their first language, and it actually creates a lack of confidence in themselves because they know this is not the thing to do inwardly. And so this neural pathway that you create by translating creates real barriers for evermore. One thing I will say, these pathways can be left to degrade. They can be left to rot away, put it that way. And the way you do that is by stopping translating. If you stop translating and stop thinking in your first language and translating into your second, any chance you get or when you need to, then these pathways will slowly degrade. They'll just slowly disappear. If you don't use it, you lose it. So it's a really good strategy to not put these pathways into place. Now again, sometimes you do need them, as I mentioned before, but if you use it once or twice or whenever, it's not going to set these pathways up. You're just using it as a tool, and it's just fine. So this is a really powerful reason, I believe, even by itself, that should stop you from translating. Now you may be asking, well, what can I do if I don't translate? Well, one thing you'll find, if you've been doing a lot of translation, is that when you stop it, you'll feel a bit of discomfort. Discomfort is fine. Just, as they say in English, suck it up. It's fine. It's something that you will soon learn to adjust to. And what will happen is that you'll find that other parts of your brain, other parts of you as a person, just swing into action. So you become more attentive, you're paying more attention, you're listening better, you're looking better. Everything starts to improve because you haven't got that go-to tool there, that translation. Other parts of you have to come into play. So your ability to guess, the ability to infer, your ability to deduce things will all improve. Of course, you can always ask the person. Now, one thing I will say about asking people, obviously you can't keep asking all the time, but sometimes you can for some critical words or issues that come up. Now, the one thing that will help you with this is to stop asking people to repeat themselves. Asking somebody, could you please say that again, is saying you haven't heard the whole sentence. Well, the reality is you have heard the sentence and you've maybe understood most of it, but there's some word or some phrase that has somehow thrown you, has somehow stopped you. So by training yourself to say something like, I'm sorry, I don't quite know if I got that, well, you're saying blah, blah, blah. Now, by doing that, you're actually showing the person you were listening really attentively, and in fact, you had to listen attentively if you're going to say that. And it forces you to bring into play, to activate what you actually heard. And if you get it a little bit wrong, they'll straighten you out. Or maybe you actually worked it out exactly. So this is a really powerful way of actually getting you to be more active in your listening and more active in getting people to help you. And the people will respect you for that. If you keep asking somebody to please repeat that, it's not a good look. But by using that strategy I just suggested, you're actually showing people that you're actually really attentive and listening, and they will appreciate that. So I hope with all this, I've completely cut that leg off, so you're a little bit less assured about believing that myth. So I hope that's been of use, and I'll talk to you next time. It's been Andrew Weiler here. Bye for now.